The following production is part of the Play Some Video Games podcast network.
Greetings, stuffies, and welcome to Board with Video Games, the gaming podcast that strives for the right balance of coverage for the games you play on your table and on your television. You can think of us as the Bill and Ted of gaming podcasts. We're a proud member of the PSVG Podcast Network. I am one of your hosts, Kyle, and joining me on this excellent co-op adventure, the guy who always knows when and where strange things are afoot, Josh. How's it going this evening?
It's going very well. Except we have about 18 to 20 inches of snow coming tomorrow. So other than that...
That is a lot of snow.
Yeah.
Like someone who grew up in northern Minnesota and lived in Minnesota and North Dakota for many years, that's a lot of snow.
You know, when they say 18 to 20, that leaves very little for error. So we know we'll be getting at least that much. So, yeah, it's going to start tomorrow, go all the way until Thursday morning. So it's going to be one of those... 36-hour storms.
Is this another Bombo Genesis or whatever they're called?
This is a nor'easter.
Oh, it's just a good old nor'easter. So you're back to the normal things.
Yeah, no Bombo Genesis. That was last week where we get nothing.
So you would prefer a Bombo Genesis is what you're saying?
Well, as I should say, where I am. I mean, the Cape almost got erased off of Massachusetts, so it was bad for the Cape, but for me, we get nothing. Just rain.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, hey, at least it keeps you busy, right? We got 2 inches of snow yesterday. That was pretty exciting.
Yeah, I'll take that instead.
Well, I felt really bad because so we've lived in Iowa for a while now. And ever since we bought our first house, we have refused to buy a snowblower because I'm you know what? If we buy a snowblower, that is giving into we would have had to use it in the 3 years we've lived here 5 or 6 times. Maybe. And I just don't feel like it's worth it, really. So I did feel kind of bad, though, because when it snowed yesterday, we got it was probably more like 3 inches or so. And I got home and I had to work late because I always work late on Mondays. And I got home and my wife had already shoveled the entire driveway. And I felt bad, not because of oh, my wife can't handle shoveling the driveway. She is extremely capable and can handle any of that stuff just fine. I just really like to shovel. I enjoy it. And probably because I don't have to do it that often, but I also really like mowing the lawn. So when I got home, I was kind of bummed because I was like, man, this is all shoveled and my wife did it. But then it was kind of interesting because my elderly neighbor was out there helping her shovel because he's 90, but he's just he always tells us, he's well, I'm from the old world, he has this chivalrous thing that he saw her out there and didn't shovel his own driveway because he pays someone to plow it, but came out with a shovel and helped my wife shovel our driveway.
Well, that's good old-fashioned gentlemanly manners.
I know it was very sweet of him, and I just get very worried though because he is like I said, he's up there in age, he's up there, but he handles himself just fine. But it always just cracks me up because he doesn't help me when I'm shoveling, never comes to help me. But when the wife's out there, he has that chivalrous side of him comes out and he has to give my wife a hand. But anyway, hey, this isn't a shuffling or weather podcast. This is a game podcast. So thanks so much for joining us this week. As always, if you have any feedback, questions, suggested topics, hit us up at Board with VG on Twitter or check out all the awesome stuff Josh posts over on Instagram, also Board with VG. You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/boardwithvg. So feel free to go say 5-star rating over there. If you enjoy the show, we hope that you do. And if you want to communicate with us maybe in a little more long form or even some long drawn out thoughts or maybe some fan fiction you want to send us, feel free to email us boardwithvg@gmail.com. And as always, on all the social medias, use that hashtag boardwithvg so we can know all the awesome things you are talking about. And, last week's show was a little more serious. Overall, people seem to enjoy it. We got a lot of positive feedback from it, but people kind of seem to enjoy that format a little bit better as well. So we're going to stick with that format this week and see how how well it works again, if people still enjoy it. So feel free to let us know. Do you prefer the format, how we're doing it now moving forward? Because we can always change it back. No big deal. But hey, enough of the housekeeping, enough of the snow talk. Josh, what have you been playing on your tabletop, sir?
It would be funny if I said nothing again, right?
It would be, but I know that's not true this time.
On fire with course. Yeah, so I'm gonna guess. Well, so we played. We finally we sat down. We turned the Oscars on. We put the baby to bed.
Oh, you're one of the few people watching it, right?
Apparently,
lowest rated Oscars ever.
There was one person who was very happy about that. I won't say who. So we had the Oscars on and turned the volume down, and we set out stuffed Fables on the floor in front of the TV because we can't play games on the table anymore because the baby sleeps right next door. So it's obviously terrible news for my back and my legs, but if it's the only way I can get gaming in, that's what I'll do. So stuffed Fables, a game that we've had some people ask us about, and it's very... I would say it's one of those hot topic games right now, especially with people wondering if they can play it without kids. A lot of people asking, is it good with just 2 players? Is it good with just adults? So I will say you can play it with 2 players that are adults. You just have to be able to do what you should do in every board game and go in with a, suspend your I want to say disbelief, your belief in reality and make yourself open to a story, and that's what you get. I didn't play. I have Mice and Mystics. I picked it up at PAX based off of talking with you about it. Mm-hmm. But I've never played it, but I know it's a similar system. So going into it not knowing Mice and Mystics, I thought it would be kind of a unique experience for me, and it certainly was. Honestly, it's not that different from Gloomhaven as far as movement goes. And even in combat, in some aspects. So I feel like it does provide some of that like heavier RPG elements with in that system. And maybe I should explain what I'm talking about before I even say stuff like that. Essentially, you're reading a storybook, which is designed for kids, really. And you can tell by the context in the storybook. I will say we only played the first real page of the game. Mm-hmm. We kind of saved our progress after that, just because we both had to be up early the next morning. And the story is from where we started, without any spoilers. You're a little girl's stuffed animals, and you are transitioning from a crib to a big girl bed. And they kind of give you the backstory on the little girl and the parents. Like, I don't want to ruin any storyline details. Not yet, at least. Maybe if we do like a spoiler review app or something. And essentially, you're starting the game the first night of the little girl in her big girl bed. And if you can imagine... like old Jim Henson movies and things like that. It has a very similar feel to like The Toy, if you've ever seen it, or The Christmas Toy, I think is the name of it. Along those lines, or even Toy Story to some extent. So you have that story, and you start with characters that you pick from, I think, 6 characters. If you follow the rules, you can't pick 2 characters right away without revealing who they are. I did pick the character who his name is Stitch, and I feel like he's right out of that movie 9. I don't know if you've seen that.
Oh yeah, he does. Yeah, definitely has like that.
Nails the look for that, right? Mm-hmm. So I thought it was cool, and so my character has a ranged fighter, which I thought was cool and unexpected. I don't know what I expected though. My wife picked Lumpy. I want to say the elephant.
Yeah. Yep.
So, and she picked him because he had this meat tenderizer as a weapon.
I picked that too.
Yeah, right. In his picture, he has that. So she was looking for it specifically. So what you do is after you pick your characters, you're going through this setup phase, and you get to pick a weapon out of preset selected weapons. And after you do that, you continue through the setup phase, and then you start encountering bad guys. You have a I'll call it they're called creepies. What are they called? I don't even remember. I know crawlies was.
Oh, the first enemies?
Zone, right? So you have like an enemy track is what I'm trying to say on the side. And as you play the game, you're drawing dice out of a bag into a die pool. If you draw black dice, those count for enemy dice. If you draw white, they count for stuffing, which is essentially your life. And then you draw dice that will either be used for movement, attack. You can store a die for future use, as in like defense against bad guys. You can also combine die to get either higher attacks or move further, etc. Basically, I enjoyed it. It was taking the story. It definitely would be. I think it would hit its audience as kids. I get that.
Yeah.
It definitely has. Me reading that story to my wife doesn't have the same effect as me reading it to a 6-year-old boy or girl. So that is definitely something I can see where having a kid would benefit the story. I think the gameplay is pretty solid and pretty on par with regular board games. My wife did love that the instruction booklet, whenever it referred to your character, it said she all the time. So, and that's I think a change in the right direction because, we have friends who are female that play board games with us, and you read the rules, and it's always like, when he does this on his next turn, or it was a very gender biased rule book situation for very many years, which is fine. I could just go through and say he or she when reading it, so not that big of a deal. I enjoyed it. I did think. The instructions, like there's a few things I missed, like maybe you could clarify, like there was a part when placing the villains and it says like choose 2 crawlies or crawlers from the thing. And I wasn't clear if that's just draw 2 bad guys off the top of the deck or search for the specific, bad guy.
That is
but
correct.
I was unclear on that because it made you shuffle the villain deck instead of it should have just said take out these out of the villain deck.
Yeah, so it does this interesting thing of sometimes it has named encounters where it says find these specific things. Right. Sometimes it'll have random encounters where it'll say, reveal the top 3 or top X number of cards based on the number of players off the villain deck. So you just do whichever it says. If it names them, you go get them. If it says random, you just draw the top cards. So It just depends.
Yeah, and then I watched the how to play video, and it did cover some things, but I tried playing the game as if I didn't watch it, and I tried to play it as we went through, because like in the how to play, it says if you get a leader card to put that at the bottom of the villains on the track. But when I drew the cards randomly, it would have been the top card. So all I did was put it up, and I just played it as if I did that. So there's a few things that we'll refine as we play.
Right.
I know I didn't do as good of a job explaining it as I would have liked, but it's because my brain's a little sporadic, scatterbrained about it, because there's just everything is new to me in the aspect of how this game is played. So I'm still kind of digesting it, even though it's been a couple of days. I will say it looks great, for sure. I like the dice. They're very colorful. I can definitely see the appeal for kids, but and for adults. And I like the character sheets. I like they have their each unique attributes, and you can also gain more attributes by doing, say, courageous things or gaining hearts from completing quests or levels or pages, however you want to define that. And I like how it has a continuous flowing story. And I like that the first page, we really didn't even scratch the surface as to what I know comes, like shops, lost items, just the story cards in general. Like there's so much more to explore. So I'm excited to play it again this weekend, probably.
Yeah, and Stuff Fables is the same game that I played. We're further in it along than you are. But I really enjoy it. I'm really enjoying the game. I'm really enjoying the gameplay. I obviously have played Mice and Mystics before. calling this a spiritual successor might make sense. I don't know if that's the intent. Obviously, it's the same designer, Jerry Hawthorne, the person who designed Mice and Mystics, designed this game as well, published by Plaid Hat, so the same company there. I've never heard if he says this is a spiritual successor. I know a lot of people refer to it as that, and there definitely are similarities when you have played them both that feel similar, but there's a number of differences too. It's definitely not like a sequel. There are definitely a number of differences. What I will say is I had the same feeling with Mice and Mystics as well. I feel like playing through the first story is all, I don't want to say a throwaway, but it is very much you're going to make mistakes and there are going to be small rules that you miss and you're almost going to want to replay it when you're done. At least that's what we wanted to do with Mice and Mystics. I feel like we are going to replay the first story again as well in Stuff Fables, mostly because I tend to overthink things. I don't think this is anything wrong with the game, but what you'll notice is when you get to the second page, so when you start your next page, I was like, what are we supposed to do? And like you read through this really well told story about everything that's going on, and you're like, okay, but now what? Like I literally was like looking at my wife, I'm like, what are we supposed to do? Like I have no idea what we're supposed to do on this page. And it tells you, like, it seems obvious as to what you should do, but I feel like there should be more than this. So I was kind of frustrated actually. I was like, well, what's going on here? And then we figured it out, and I figured it out. It was as simple as I thought it was. But I just didn't feel like it could be that simple, but it totally was. It was just like, do this thing. Oh, okay. I guess that's what we're supposed to do. So it didn't end up being that simple of like accomplishing the task, but like what we were supposed to do was actually very straightforward. So the other thing that I really enjoy about it is that there is a good amount of replayability in this game though, because when you get to page 1 is very much like, here's the very basics of how this game's plays. Page 2 starts stacking some more things and adding a bit more complexity to what's happening there, introducing a few of the additional rules that you didn't play on the first page. But then it also adds, I don't want to say a choose your own adventure, but like kind of a pick your goal of what you want to accomplish. Because if you complete this page by doing this, then go to this page. But if you complete it by doing this, then go to this page. So there actually is some replayability there in that if you play it again, you might be able to accomplish the task in a different way or through a different technique or through a different method that will then take you through a different path through the story. So I think that is cool, and it does add a little bit of replayability for people who are concerned that like, well, there's 7 stories in this adventure book. How much use is that, or how much gameplay am I going to get out of that? But you're right. It looks really pretty. The artwork, I think, is beautiful. I think the stories are really well written. We don't have kids, and I still think the stories are great, especially if you look at them for what they are and what they're about. I think they do a really cool job and good job of setting up place and making you feel like you're there and having a good perspective on everything that's happening. I think the adventure book aspect of it is pretty cool. The fact that the game board is this book that you have. Yeah. And I think it makes it really easy to hopefully make not super expensive expansions that you literally could just print a new book.
Yeah, they have a print and play now, right? Like a little sub story or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. So like they could easily do a print and play. You could pay, to download a PDF, or they could give occasional ones out for free. Like I think they could easily add to it just because of that. I know you haven't gotten to this yet, but there are things called lost cards. Yeah. And I really enjoy them because they almost feel like the Crossroads mechanic that's from Dead of Winter. It's a little bit different because you always you will pick when one happens, in the sense of like you have to go across this space that has this marker on it, and then the lost card gets drawn in red. So it's not like a surprise thing that's going to happen. Like something's going to happen, but it very much gives you a scenario of like, hey, you've ran across this. Are you going to do this or this? And then you choose, and there's something that happens as a result of that. So that adds some flavor and some change up too, because that's a randomly drawn card. So I'm really enjoying Stuff Fables. I give it a really high recommendation. We obviously still have a lot to play still, but initial impressions are really positive. Like I said, I got a little frustrated on the one page, but I think it is something though that, like you said, there are some really nuanced little rules that are going to be hard to remember. Like, hey, when you defeat a leader, make sure you take a button and a courageous thing, not just a like. So there's a lot of really little small rules. And Mice and Mystics is the same way. There's a lot of those little rules that you're not going to run across very often, and they're going to probably be easy to forget. But they're not also going to break the game if you forget them.
Right.
So yeah, I really enjoy it. The only other frustration I had was sometimes I didn't totally understand for the items. Like it sounds like in the rules that when you get an item, like when you get like a new weapon, like you have to take it or give it to someone else to take. It doesn't sound like in the rules you can just discard it.
Right.
So that's where I'm like, I don't know if I can or not. It says like, hey, draw the card and equip it or give it to someone else to equip.
Yeah.
Can I just get rid of it? Like, do I have to get rid of this really awesome weapon that I have? So then I was like, well, I feel like it. So I don't know. That's a rule I'm going to double check on. And like I said, that doesn't break the game for me in any way. But, you do run into occasion where like you want to do something, you don't have the color dice that you want or something like that. But for the most part, overall, I think it's a really clever mechanism. I think how they use the dice is really smart. I think it adds a lot of variety. I think it helps you plan, but also you have to take a little bit of like, what am I going to get into consideration? So overall, really enjoying the game. Definitely going to continue to play it. But if you're on the fence about it or not certain about it, I would recommend it even after just playing one story so far.
Yeah, I agree. For sure.
Awesome. So, hey, we both played the same board game. What are the chances we played the same video game? Josh, what have you been playing on your television?
We did not play the same game.
I know we didn't.
Well, I'll let you talk about it. So a couple quick hits, and then I'll tell you about what I spent most of my time with. I can now confirm to you, we talked about it. We talked about Celeste before. Mm-hmm. My wife was watching Gilmore Girls in the bedroom, and now that I got an extra Switch dock, mm-hmm. which now resides in the bedroom. So now we can play in the living room TV or the bedroom TV. Mm-hmm. So I put in Celeste. Mm-hmm. By the way, I found the computer Celeste thing, like the little Pico TV.
Oh, okay. Yep.
Does it never end? Because I get to a point where I just couldn't deal anymore. It was too hard. I spent like 45 minutes in this stupid little TV game, and I kept like, I don't know. I just didn't find an end. I was like, does it just keep going? So I had to stop that. But I can confirm to you that the controls are worse in handheld.
Okay.
I was trying to do diagonal jumps, and I just kept dying and dying and dying. I had no problem on the TV doing it. So I after like 45 deaths, I remembered you asking me about that. Mm-hmm. And I'm getting frustrated. My wife's like, what's wrong? I'm like, it's not doing what I'm telling it to do. So I did that. We played the Kirby demo, which
How
is
was that?
Now. It's very pretty. It's a little too busy. There's too much going on. You literally have 3 people following on top of you everywhere you go in the level. And if it's 2 people playing, you have 2 other people on top of you, and you're trying to stay together and on the screen at the same time. So my wife didn't like it only because she couldn't really see what she was doing, which I totally get. Mm-hmm. So I think it's gonna be a pass for me just because there's too much going on. And I like to be able to, I don't like just to have luck of completing a level or beating a boss. Mm-hmm. So like, that's what I feel like it would come down to. We got started to play. I was like, we need co-op games to play together. So we picked up Snipperclippers, Cut It Out Together, or whatever the expansion one is, mm-hmm. or Snipperclips or whatever it's called.
Snipperclips, yeah.
So we played some levels just like winding down after our day in bed, like pop it on TV, play like 5 levels. Mm-hmm. Super fun, cooperative. So, we could congratulate each other on getting puzzles solved. It's a nice change instead of beating each other at everything. And then I started playing a game. I started and finished a game, and I'm going to describe it to you. I want to see if you can guess it. Okay. Because board with video games, we play all the old games like they were new. So I'm going to explain this game to you. So you are 2 children. Your mother goes missing, and your father, who has to raise you, ends up disappearing, and you think he dies in war. You are then raised by a military man who looks like Sergeant Slaughter. You get bionic upgrades, and you start going through levels of a game where you will be going through like a Power Rangers level, a Indiana Jones level. You will be trying to get the Holy Grail. You will be in a cowboy movie. You will be on rockets jumping to other rockets. You'll be on the moon, on Mars. You fight CIA agents, which are actually not, it doesn't stand for Central Intelligence Agency, but it's insectoid aliens. Does it ring any bells yet?
What did you play this on?
Played it on the Xbox. Part of the game, you are playing side scroll shooter, almost Contra-ish. Part of the other game is a Trials.
Oh, did you play Trials of the Blood Dragon?
I did.
Okay. I was like, I've never played it, so I know, but I was like, what the heck is going on? I was like,
it is bonkers.
Okay, I've never played it. So
it's a free game. It's one of the free games for Games of Gold.
Okay.
It is a parody of 90s, old school 90s cartoons-ish, even to the point where in the middle of the animated story, it will cut to fake commercial clips real quick from the 90s. One of the levels you literally have to kill your favorite, the Power Rangers TV show characters you love as a kid. That boy's name is Slay. I forget the girl's name, but it's something. I don't know, Bronx or Brox or something like that. So you play brother and sister, and they cooperate between levels. So I played Trials before. I played Trials Fusion before. It's a game that I always found to be interesting, but not like crazy groundbreaking for me. I think Trials Fusion kind of pushed the boundaries on that, where the levels are a little bit more interesting. But this game blows it out of the water. There's literally a level where I'm on a rocket, on a motorcycle, driving on a rocket in the middle of the air, and I have to jump off of it before it explodes onto another rocket, and then jump off of that onto the ground before that rocket explodes. Every level is insanely unique and is constantly changing. Some levels, if you know the Trials look, it's almost like a off-center third-person view, but sometimes they turn it completely sideways, like a side scroll. There's kaiju in it. There's which are technically blood dragons. There's plot twists. There's engaging story. There's cliffhangers. The combat is actually pretty good. There's even stealth missions. It's just, I started it and finished it today.
Oh, wow. Okay. So it's short.
It's short. I just didn't put it down. It was so engaging, and I died. One level I died 73 times.
Oh, nice. So it's like Celeste.
Yeah, well, except you get penalized in time.
Wow. And
you get rated. So the levels where, like, if the time runs out, you don't lose the level, but you don't get any points.
Okay.
And you level up your Pokemon character, and it evolves as you level it up. I picked the shark, of course. So the shark was constantly getting bigger and scarier. But there was a lot of levels I got like an F, and that feels bad. And,
it's like getting a Stone Award in Bayonetta.
Yeah, and then you get no points though, and you don't progress your level at all. But you can still move through the story, which I liked. Yeah, it was just super fun. If you have Games of Gold, there's no reason why you shouldn't play this game. And even if you just like give it enough to get through like the first motorcycle part, if you don't love that, and get to like the first time you're on the ground, running and shooting, and see if you enjoy that. But it has a nice balance of going back and forth. You don't feel like you're ever doing too much of one thing. And there was a few times where I was like, I'm going to stop. But I was like, no, I'm going to keep going. Like I did that. It was like at level 15, and I was like, I'm going to stop. No, I'll keep going. Level 25. I should stop. No,
I'll keep going.
So, huge, awesome, nice. They did a throwback game, and it didn't have to be 8-bit. So,
It's true.
Or pixel, whatever you want to call it. So, I thought it was great. I'm glad I tried it. I'm glad I played it. I also played Mighty Number 9 today, and then I deleted it. So I don't know if that says anything.
Group?
No, sorry. And then I did start Rise of the Tomb Raider. I posted some pictures on my Twitter about. I'm in awe. I think this came out in 2016.
Yeah, 15 because 2016 was when it came out on PS4.
Oh, okay. I'm in awe of how amazing it looks in 4K.
Well, I mean, it's that game, but with like updated assets.
Well, it gives you the same options as like Monster Rancher. Like you can choose pure 4K. You can choose 4K at 30 frames per second, or you can choose 60 frames per second. You have 3 different options in the option menu. You can also turn HDR on or off.
Right. But it's not like the same game that was released then. It's like you have additional assets you have to download in order to get the stunning visuals of the one.
Sorry.
You know what I'm saying?
Well, I'm using it on the Xbox One X. That's
right. That's what I'm saying. Like it's a much larger, not saying it still doesn't look stunning. Not quite exactly the same. For
me, sorry, I should have prefaced that.
Yeah, no, I know.
Yeah, using the power of X, it looks incredible. I put some screenshots up. It's just breathtaking to look at, and I'm gonna just jump headfirst into that and give it a full go because I really enjoyed the first one. Mm-hmm. So I'm looking.
So you haven't played it yet?
No, this is the first time I played it.
Oh, nice! I really enjoyed it. It was a fun game.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I really like the actress who plays her as well, Camilla Leddington. So I like her voice acting too. She's like she suits the role. I was actually bummed she wasn't cast as much as I love Alicia Vikander.
Yeah.
So anyways, I could ramble. Let's talk about what you've been looking forward to talking about.
Well, really briefly, I think Tomb Raider is always the interesting dichotomy because everybody compares Tomb Raider and Uncharted. And for me, Tomb Raider was the game I wanted to keep playing because I enjoyed the combat so much. Uncharted is the game I want to keep playing because I enjoy the story so much.
Yeah, for sure. I agree with that.
So, and I think the story in this one, I think it was fine. And I know some people loved it. I just thought it was fine. But the combat, and everything was just great. Environments were wonderful. Yeah, it's the deaths still make my heart hurt. Yeah, it's a great game. I really enjoyed it. And if I had an Xbox One X, maybe I would play it again with the stunning visual. I might play it again anyway since it's on Game Pass. Because I did have fun with that game, so I might play it again anyway. But hey, I'm not here to talk about that game. I'm going to talk about a different game that truly gives you that is in a true different way to play. Not just it looks prettier. And that is for those of you who don't know, I don't think what's that?
But I'm sorry.
I'm just saying it's different, I don't know if I've ever even talked about a PSVR game on this show yet, but I do have PSVR. And last E3, PlayStation showed off a trailer for this adorable game that really people got really caught up in it. We're really excited about it, and that was the game called Moss, which finally, I shouldn't say finally, which came out just about a week or so ago, and I had a chance to finally jump into it and play it. It's from the folks at Polyarch. It is and this is their first game, I believe, and it is a adventure puzzle game with a little bit of combat. And you play in your PSVR unit. You are a reader who is helping Quill on her journey to save her uncle. And this game is absolutely incredible. And my favorite PSVR game, and probably my favorite game I've played this year. It is exceptional. And it uses and I think we are reaching the point now where games are starting to be able to use, especially PSVR, because this is a little less powerful. Obviously, it doesn't have the juice of the rigs behind like a Rift or wow, why am I blanking on the other one?
Oculus Rift?
No, Rift and
the Vive.
Thank you. It doesn't have the juice behind the PCs, that run those rigs. But I don't know how they have done it, but the folks at Polyarch really have put together a special game here. And one of the things that really happens in VR is you get this screen door effect because it has to generate the image twice and has to run at such a high frame rate. And because the image is so close to your face, you get this screen door effect where it looks like you're looking at everything through a screen door. So there's little squares in it because it's so close, you can actually start to see between the pixels. It's almost completely gone in this game. There's virtually no screen door effect in this game, which, number one, because of the power of the PS4, and I just have a base PS4, kind of blows my mind. And what the game is Quill comes into a, for lack of a better word, like a map or a level. I don't know how you want to describe it, but there's basically a diorama in front of you, a 3D diorama. And if you look to the left, you can see all of the previous, like, where she has come from and all the previous things you have done. And if you look to the right, you can see the things that are coming up, unless like you're in a really small enclosed one, you maybe can't see that far. But it's really cool where like you can see all of the environment around you very, very well. Like you can look back and see what you've done. You can look forward to the future. Beautiful backgrounds of what's going on around you. But then you have this diorama in front of you that you are looking all around. You can stand up, you can lean over it, you can like lean to the side and really see what is the puzzle that you have to figure out to help Quill progress on her adventure. And they just do really, really, the controls are very intuitive because you move Quill, because you're playing with the DualShock 4, you're not using the move-ons, but you're moving Quill with the left thumbstick, and then you're moving the DualShock 4, and you can, like, as the reader, grab things and move things while you're also moving Quill at the same time. And it took a little bit to get used to. It was a little weird because, like, it was kind of like the olden days when people first got their Nintendos and they would, like, move to like jump. Yeah, exactly. You kind of feel like you're doing that a little bit, which I haven't done in forever, but now I felt like I was doing again. But it's kind of, it works really surprisingly well. Quill is really adorable, and the animation for her is absolutely brilliant. Like how she moves through the environments and how she interacts with things is just awesome. The puzzles are smart. They're complicated, but not so complicated that you're like, I can't figure this out, but you still feel smart when you get through them. The game is beautiful for being not this 4K 65-inch screen like behemoth. Like for what they're able to do with the power of, in some ways how underpowered the PS4 is to run VR, like how good this game looks is pretty amazing to me. It looks exceptional. The sound is great. This is just really, really stellar work by the folks over at Polyarch. I think this game has exceeded my very high expectations for it. I was really, really excited for it. And, it's funny because if you read the reviews for it, the only real knock on it is the game is kind of short. And it is. It is not super, super long. But I had so much fun in it and playing it and being in that world that like I want there to be a sequel. Like I hope this game does well enough that we can get a sequel to it. And I'm never a person to say if you own it, like I never say you should buy a system for one game. Like I don't think that's the thing you should do. However, if you own a PSVR, this is absolutely a game you need to own and a game you need to play because it truly shows you how great and how cool VR can be. There might be some better VR games that are on the PC, but on PSVR, I think this is a must buy and a must play. It is exceptionally well done game.
Nice. I know I want a PSVR to play it, but it's just not in the cards, I don't think, right now. But
well, just come visit me in Iowa.
Yeah, I think for the airfare, I could go buy a PSVR.
That's very true. That's very true.
So, yeah, I could knock that out. No, I mean, I've always looked at the PSVR from afar, and it's always been something I've been kind of like interested in. But the more I've heard about this game and the more I've heard you talk about it, I definitely see the appeal, and it would be something that I totally agree with you as far as if I got a PSVR, that would be the first game I got for it, for sure.
Yeah, it is great. So, hey, we've been taking a lot of time so far, but we have a topic that we were going to talk about today. Yeah. So this week it was announced that Microsoft is bringing back Inside Xbox in a new format as a monthly streaming show. If you remember, I think Inside Xbox was a thing that I think ran on like the 360 dashboard.
Yeah, and on the Xbox One dashboard.
Okay, and that obviously I didn't know, but I remember seeing it on my 360.
Yeah.
But it's going to be an opportunity to get updates on the latest games, behind-the-scene infos on a bunch of things coming to the platform. And this just kind of seems to be that next step in game makers and console manufacturers talking directly to their audience, right? You have Nintendo Directs, PlayStation Underground and the Blogcast, Inside Xbox and The Wire. And then on the board game side, you have things like Renegade Society Radio, the ambassador programs that seemingly every board game company seems to have, and really kind of interesting, quirky things like Restoration Games announcing that they're taking their $3,000 prototype of Fireball Island on tour during the Kickstarter campaign and stopping at local games, like at board game cafes and podcast places, just to show it off and talk to people about the game. So clearly, companies are reaching out more and more to their consumers. But what does this mean for being a gamer? How long are shows like E3 going to be around, or are things like PSX going to become the norm? Will Asmodee eventually run its own board game convention just focusing on the games that it develops? You know, is it possible to keep up with all the news these days when it's coming from so many different places? And is this good or bad for gamers? So we just want to have a brief conversation, you know, with all the influx of news and the ways to get it, including us. Like, we sit here and we talk about news, and we're just one more of a large number of, you know, content creators out there talking about games. How do we become informed consumers? How do we know what we're getting into? Does it matter that, you know, we talk about, hey, we want to hear directly from the companies, but obviously that's going to be a little bit of a biased message. How do we keep up with this stuff? And does it force us to become more selective? Josh, what do you think, man?
You know, where to begin? That's like
that's a lot of things, right?
50 questions. I mean, I don't know. Where should I start? Let's say, well, so you said something like about how there's so much content out there. I if you look at my podcast feed, I can tell you just from that I don't have enough time to keep up. So, I mean, focus-driven content is what you need to understand is the future, because everyone, and not like you need to understand it, but as in like everyone has an interest. Mm-hmm. And if I'm interested in Xbox first and foremost, as far as video games go, then I'm going to seek out the Xbox Drive, like Sean Capri's podcast, you know, or Nathan's podcast. He just launched on BWVG, State of the
Xbox Empire.
He's gonna kill me. Yeah, State of the Empire.
Okay, the PlayStation guys got you covered. No worries.
Yeah, so like that's my focus, right? So for video games, I'll focus on that. You know, for board games, I listen to Dice Tower. I haven't jumped on Renegade Society yet, but I'm interested just because I love everything they do. Mm-hmm. But, you know, if Plaid Hat or Asmodee or whoever, like, that's a board game company that I like did a podcast, I would decide if I would fit it into what I can listen to. I don't typically surf the web for news necessarily anymore. If it comes to me, I'll read it. Mm-hmm. Like if it's on Twitter, that's pretty much my surfing the web now, is just Twitter. You know, if I see something on Twitter because I'm following Fireside Games or whoever, or Restoration Games, that's how I'll get that news. Or when we're looking into stories we want to talk about. But yeah, there's just so much content out there that like for us, I'm thankful for the listeners we have now, like, because we could have no listeners.
Right.
I know we have listeners, but I'm just thankful that we're someone's, you know, Thursday morning or Thursday night or Thursday drive home, whatever the case may be. Mm-hmm. You know, I'm thankful for that, knowing how much content there is out there.
Do you think there's too much?
Yeah, but that's what this country is. Everything, abundance. Like, it's fine. It can be overwhelming sometimes, though. Mm-hmm. You know, like too much. You can take that as a good thing or a bad thing. I think there's too much, but mm-hmm. that doesn't necessarily mean it's bad. It's just there can be too much of a good thing,
right?
Especially if you're trying to choose from the pile of good things, and you have to miss out on something.
Do you think we'll get to a point where you don't, I don't think like IGN is going anywhere or GameSpot is going anywhere, but do you think we'll get to a point where, because everyone talks about like how Nintendo Directs are like the way to go, right? It's Nintendo talking directly to their audience, but it's also them crafting a very specific message. You know, like I listen to the PlayStation Blogcast. I also know if they don't talk about a game, it just probably means it's not very good. They're never going to come on there and be like, hey, this game for PS4 sucks. Like, right. They're not going to do that. But if they don't talk about a game, I can probably assume that it's not probably a great game. Like, do you think that by having, you know, those crafted messages directly from the companies, that potentially we lose some of the critical eye to the information that we're getting.
I mean, I think like, yeah, no one wants to listen to a puff piece for an hour. Like, if they want to hear, like, we could easily just talk about games we like, but sometimes we play crappy games. Sometimes we want to tell people if we think they should skip something, if we think they should avoid something, if we feel like we invested our time in like a Breath of the Wild, for example, like one of the worst games ever made.
I was listening, actually, it was really interesting. I was listening to a different podcast this week, and their guest was talking about how much they hated Breath of the Wild. And I was like, oh man, that's crazy.
Yeah.
There's three of us at least, and I don't hate Breath of the Wild. And you don't.
I'm obviously kidding. I'm obviously kidding. Sorry, Donnie. But I mean, if you want to go to IGN and you just want to read the good things, that's your prerogative. I mean, I think we talked about it before. I don't even look at review scores in my Game Informer anymore because they're all above 7, 8, 9.
They gave a game a 2.5 just the other day.
Well, I'm in the Game Informer magazine.
It was on their website. We'll see if it maybe is a short in the magazine going forward.
For the most part,
that last page of it tends to be like where they have the blurbs.
Yeah, who looks at that?
Scores. I look at it.
So I don't like. I'll pull something up next week. Like I guarantee you, I can go look at my Game Informer now and find a game that is scored way higher than Metacritic.
Well, probably.
Yeah.
You can probably find one scored way lower too, though.
Maybe not. We'll see. I'm going to test it out. I'll take a look.
I guess I'll pull up my Game Informers as well, and we'll take.
I guess my point is, I feel like people don't focus on like the bad games, which is fine. But I'm not going to open up my Game Informer and the first game they review is a 2.
Okay, so your argument is that they are focusing on mostly on the good games, high-profile games, that they're not taking the time to review the cruddy ones.
Right.
Okay.
Like if we go to like record next week and you played a terrible game and that's all you played, would you come on and say, I didn't play anything this week? Like that's not what people want. Like you want to say, unfortunately I played this game, or like Josh convinced me to spend $15 on Gang Beasts and it's terrible.
I haven't played it yet.
As an example, like,
you're too busy playing PUBG with everyone. We can't play Gang Beasts.
That'd be a Kevin review. So I don't know. I've been rambling on this, and you're asking me all the questions. So what do you think? I'll say this before. If you go to IGN's page, look at how different it is than how it was 6 months ago. I think that's a sign of them changing with content, because now you go to IGN and it's not even games on the forefront. It's movie reviews, it's magazine reviews, whatever. Yeah, so like that's their change. But what do you think on the matter as far as I think the original question you asked me was like, is that stuff going to still be around, the big major like publications and stuff?
I mean, like, do we need E3 anymore? Like, I think it's fun, but do we need it? I mean, you could argue, because back in the day, like, it was a buying show. Like, like, hey, Walmart, look at all the sweet games you want to buy from us. Like, do we need it anymore?
I think if everyone got on board with Nintendo, like the Nintendo Direct, I would say no, but I don't think we're there yet. I mean, yes, so you could wake up tomorrow and Xbox could be like, okay, we hear you. We'll do it. And then Sony could be like, yeah, well, instead of the PS experience, we'll just do, we'll put this out to the world on Thursday afternoon. Like we've seen like flashes of it, like the Paris games for PlayStation, and then Microsoft's Gamescom terrible conference they did. Like they've tried it, they've dabbled in it, but I think that it would be like trying to get rid of Comic-Con. Yeah, because Comic-Con doesn't sell comics anymore. They're all Marvel. So I don't think you can get rid of E3.
Yeah, I just find it interesting because like we just heard today, the day we're recording, like the State of Decay 2 release date got announced via IGN first.
Yeah.
The Detroit Become Human release date was announced on the PlayStation blog along with the God of War release date. Like I truly do wonder. I think I enjoy E3 because I think it's a really cool time for people who love games to get together and talk about all the cool stuff they saw. Like, I think that's great. But I wonder since so much happens there and everyone is vying for the attention, is everyone better served if they get to own the news cycle for a week or a couple days when no one else is doing their thing? Like when PSX happens, like nothing else is going on.
Right.
You know, when Nintendo does their directs, nothing else is going on. Like there was rumors about a direct potentially happening this week, and that's like all the Nintendo people have been talking about. And we don't even know if it's happening, you know? Yeah. So I do truly wonder if folks are looking like, I don't think Xbox is bringing back Inside Xbox in the format that they are, because they don't think that it's going to be a better way for them to communicate with their fan base.
But if they get rid of E3, don't you think that would change the dynamic of these then you would have a direct and then Microsoft would be like, oh, we're going to do a Microsoft Insider at the same exact time?
No, I don't think so at all. I don't think they would do it at the same time, because then you have to compete.
Yeah, like, that's what they want, right?
Well, I think the clearest indication of it, and I could be wrong about this, but when Microsoft moved their press conference last year forward a day,
yeah,
I think they wanted to, or I think it was forward a day, right? Is what they did?
Yeah, like earlier. Yeah.
Yeah, because they would go in the morning and then Sony would go at night. So then all of the headlines that night into the next morning were all about the Sony press conference.
Right.
Like Microsoft wanted the time. They were competing on Monday. They were competing for the time, and it wasn't doing them any good. Is it better to fight with Nintendo, or is it say, hey, you know what? Let Nintendo have their 3 days into the sun. We're going to go a week later, and then we're going to have our 3 days into the sun.
Right. Yeah, that's true.
And I don't know. Maybe it's not. I just think and here's kind of where a lot of this for me was coming from. I'm wondering if how games media as a whole is going, and this goes for board games too, to a degree. I feel like almost there is a push that you have to kind of pick a horse.
Right.
Like to be up to, like, I'm primarily a PlayStation person, but I have a Nintendo, I have a Switch, and I have an Xbox. It is almost impossible for me to stay up to date with what is happening with those two things, because there's so much PlayStation news in and of itself.
Yeah.
That then also trying to stay up to date with board games makes it really, really, and board game news comes out of everywhere. Like there's no, like, I mean, you can go to like Dice Tower News, but there's not like a really great, like, there's no real IGN GameSpot. Like you don't have all these options.
Right.
So I feel like, and probably that's what the companies are trying to do, is it almost is it's becoming harder and harder to be a well-rounded, like I have my foot kind of in every camp gamer, that you're almost forced to pick a horse. You're almost forced to be like, hey, if I want to feel like I'm in the know, I got to pick a thing to be in the know about.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's why there's so much variety, because you can go everywhere and everyone's talking about something different because they have the options to do so.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why people change. That's why IGN's like, oh, we're going to cover TV shows now, because people started coming back to our sites because we reviewed The Walking Dead. You know?
Right. And Game of Thrones.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's good. That's great for them. But I don't know. For me, like, I'm one of those people that stopped going to IGN because that's not what I was looking for.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and for me, for every one of me they lose, they probably gained 1,000 other people.
Right. And because I think part of it too is you get into the idea of, you know, like if I were, and this happens like the couple times I guess on the Nintendo Shack, like I know the Nintendo games I play. I know that like Kirby's coming out and that Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze is coming out. And
that already came out.
Well, but it's coming out for Switch. I know it came out on Wii U. Thank you very much, smart Alec. But I know that's scheduled for May. I don't really know much else that's going on. Like if you're like, hey, who are Nintendo's developers? I'm like, well, I know they have like the teams within Nintendo that have like funky names, but I couldn't tell you anything. Like I just don't know those things. Yeah. Which then I feel like if you are somebody listening to that podcast, you're immediately like, well, why is this person on here? They don't know anything.
Right.
I know more than they do. So why are they on this podcast? You know, the same thing happens to, and I get guilty of this. Like if I'm listening to a podcast, even by people who have been doing this for years and years, and they, you know, are like, oh, and then PlayStation did this. I'm like, no, it wasn't that. It was this other thing. Why are you even doing, like, you don't know what you're talking about. Yeah. Like I do it too, you know? And it's like, I feel like we've become so focused on people being experts in things that it's just becoming harder and harder just to enjoy stuff, because there is so much information available, and there's always going to be somebody who has more time or more inclination or more passionate about something. So it becomes hard to be like, yeah, am I an imposter? Should I be doing this podcast or not? Should I be talking about this thing or not? Do I have the right to talk about this thing? And it becomes, I don't know, for me in some ways, it becomes harder to enjoy the hobby as much.
Sure. I don't disagree with that. It's stressful. It really is.
The thing we love is stressful. Why does it have to be that way?
All
right.
How it is.
Hey, so we're actually like out of time.
Yeah, we are.
Do you have anything you would like to say to wrap up this?
Yeah, I'll say, so we had 2 questions from Splig. We'll answer them next week, I promise.
Yes, they are actually, I think they will both be, we'll have 2 mini topics of the week, and Splig, your 2 questions will be our 2 mini topics of the week next week.
And I think your first question was probably answered in this episode, but we'll hit it directly next week. I have plenty more recommendations for VR I can make. So I'm going to post some pictures up on the Instagram of our first attempt at a first playthrough on Stuff Fables. And I think I took a screenshot or 2 of some of the Xbox games I played. I'll post those up there. You know where to find me. Short and sweet. If I don't get buried by the snow, you'll see me again or hear me again next week. Kyle.
Awesome. Well, hey, if you have feedback on, how do you keep up with news? Is there too much information these days? Feel free to reach out to us. You can email us, boardwithvg@gmail.com, or talk to us on Twitter. If you want to talk to me directly, you can find me on Twitter, Instagram, PlayStation, Xbox, all those things at Cyclocross, CYCOCROSS. If you have suggestions for future topics on the show, go ahead and reach out to us, because you can be like, Splig, and we're going to cover your topics next week. And those will be our whole topics of the show. So feel free to reach out to us, and we will happily take your topics or your questions and make them a focus, because we appreciate that you all take the time to listen to us. And remember, everyone, whether it be board games or video games, never stop gaming.
This has been a production of the Play Some Video Games Podcast Network. Find more great content at playsomevideogames.com.